morning. Ryan, thank you so
Yeah.
much for doing this. So today I'm joined by Ryan Shelton, the founder and COO of PhotoniCare. So at the time we're doing this interview today, we've been working together for well over a year now. Time flies when you're having fun. It has been a fun project. I'm sure it's been stressful as well for you. Um, and it's such a big undertaking in the commercialization journey. And I want to start by saying it's been a real honor to work with you and your team on this. I wish truly all of our clients were like you and your team. I just want to start out by saying that. So the feedback goes both ways. We've just really enjoyed the partnership. So as it relates to us partnering on your real world evidence gen journey, if it's okay with you, I want to take you back to the very beginning in some of our early conversations, because, like all founders, you had really big decisions in front of you, and there's always a lot of voices, aren't there?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And it's so hard. I have so much empathy for founders because it's so hard to know who to listen to, who to trust, and you're hearing so many different voices. So I wondered if you could just share a little bit about what gave you ultimately the trust and confidence to place this very important undertaking, in our hands in partnership with you.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's always a lot of voices, and our job as leaders is to take all of those inputs and use them to drive value in the business. So, to answer your question, I think yeah, we were very focused. We'd done a lot of clinical trials in the past, so some more clinical studies, a couple of registered trials, but they had pretty much all been internal, and we had some expertise internal to be able to do that kind of thing. But we were looking at our first kind of interventional RCT effort that would be driving some just really important things in our business, especially around reimbursement. And we really wanted to make sure that we nailed that. And so we, had talked to a few firms about this and tried to figure out what's the right protocol for meeting not only these, reimbursement related outcomes, but also something that would help drive adoption on the marketing front and, potentially even be used for regulatory at some point. So trying to hit, as a startup does, as many um, birds with one stone. And you guys just the way you approached learning about our space, about our technology, and then trying to put together protocols with outcomes that made sense, not only for what's the best possible protocol for this disease, but looking at, okay, in the context of a startup that has these goals to meet and these constrained resources, right? What is our best chance for success? And I think that's really what the way you guys thought about that and came up with a solution that made a lot of sense to us on a protocol front, really differentiated you, I think, and as alongside your expertise in reimbursement. I mean, I'd been I'd seen your kind of thought leadership years
Mm.
before we engaged here, and that also helps give confidence.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, you kind of touched on what we think is one of our key differentiators, and it's not always easy to for anyone. I always think it's a little ironic, we help our clients, develop, prove, and communicate their value, and of course we have to do the same, and it's never quite as easy as you think it might be. And I think that because our market is so siloed, and you can get very myopic just in general on what's like right in front of you. And so sometimes I think medtech developers, founders don't always necessarily understand, if they're looking to do their clinical study, how having all of that expertise kind of combined in one team and one group, how that can be beneficial, because maybe they're just thinking, well, similar to you had other reimbursement people advising you, I've got these experts over here and I just need someone to do my clinical study. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about, from your point of view, how having that expertise helped specifically in what people might be thinking of as a true like med affairs clinical activity.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think if we've been I think as a startup in medtech, we're probably a little unique in that our team has knows quite a bit more and has dealt with a lot more of the reimbursement piece, right? A lot of times startups aren't going out and generating new CPT codes and getting them converted, all that stuff. And if there's one thing that I've learned since kind of hammering on that since 2016 or so, it's there's you're not going to find one shop that is good at all of it, and we had to learn that the hard way early on. And this is less about clinical and more about kind of looking at strategy and execution and customer support as it pertains to reimbursement and market access and all this stuff. A lot of places say, yeah, we'll do all of it, but you end up piecing a lot of things together because there are different experts in different spaces. And I think, having learned that the hard way over a number of years, is what kind of drove, us to think, okay, as we're approaching this clinical trial, we really need, folks that know both sides. And, we didn't have anybody internally that really was really good at health economics and clinical trial design, and being able to get somebody that can really hammer on both of those rather than having to serve as essentially an intermediary for a CRO executing and then a group of experts on clinical trial design and outcomes and data. So that really came from a lot of harder learnings in the past, but
Yeah.
it's very rare that you're going to get one shop that in such a complex environment is good at all of it.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head with what my experience has been in terms of things we've seen, where when you've got sort of all of these different experts in this patchwork of experts, it's sort of like these risk gaps, where you're passing information around and trying to, get everyone aligned. And inevitably someone says they disagree, or why did you do this, or I wouldn't have done it that way. And it feels like the founders can kind of fall into any number of those gaps as you've got, you're trying to put these pieces together. And that was definitely one of my motivations and visions as the leader of TTi, is that while I didn't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none company, I did want to bring some breadth and integrated market expertise so that nothing was being done in a vacuum. Because I see that so often. It's like, I would get protocol after protocol and just, gosh, why are you doing this? Or why are you not doing this over here? When you could be really maximizing your ROI. So anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's how we kind of got started. I mean, we had a protocol that we had kind of put together with another firm, and through talking with you, you kind of reframed some of it to say, why don't we try to grab this value over here and this grab value over here for the same amount of cost or not much different, and this is why this is synergistic, and thinking about it holistically with the benefit of having the expertise on the clinical and data side as well as the reimbursement side. That was very helpful.
Great, thank you. And do you feel now that we're a year into it and you've been able to see things materialize, are you happy with how things are turning out and as we planned and as we expected?
Yeah, I mean, we this was an ambitious timeline, right? I mean, it was a lot of patience over just a few months time. So I've been very happy with it. I think it's going to be very impactful. We'll have publications coming out over the next few months, and they're going to be driving a lot of value in the business. And I've been, as kind of point on this part of the project, I have been impressed with the ability of your team to maintain timelines, maintain clear communication about all aspects of the project, and just your team's flexibility. If something changes, hey, let's talk about it and let's figure it out. And that's yeah, it's been great.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot because that's something we work hard at and we pride ourselves on. Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned another firm, if you don't mind me asking, and again, without naming any names, I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about any CRO experiences you've had in the past, bad experiences. I know that was mentioned up front, and I think underlied, and this happens a lot, underlied, a lot of risk concerns for you that we needed to mitigate up front. So I wondered if you could just talk generally about the differences you observed in kind of working with us versus maybe some of those other experiences.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it boils down to a lack of what we talked about, over the last few minutes in terms of what you guys bring to the table. But we had kind of an engagement with one that was really more about the protocol piece. And it was ultimately something that was kind of over engineered without hitting some other obvious value points, and so kind of a learning process along the way. Others that we've talked to, we end up it's one thing to get a reference that's provided by the by the firm, and those are almost always good, right? Like they're not
Right.
going to give
Of
you
course.
a bad one. So, just like if you're hiring somebody, when you get good at trying to at hiring people or bringing somebody on your board or even partnering with an investor, right? You don't just take whoever they throw at you. You need to dig a little bit, and
Right.
In some of these cases, when you dig a little bit, it's not great. So, there's a lot of stories about things that have gone wrong out there. A lot of stories about just internal problems, and and some of that too, and that kind of shaped how we've navigated the space with respect to some opportunities and firms.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, so speaking of that, because to your point, I'm hoping that this might help other companies who are struggling to make the same decision that you were, a little over a year ago. Um, if you could talk to yourself back then, or if you could talk to other founders or executives who are sort of in that space, what would you tell them to really help build confidence in their decision and help them de-risk? Because as you know, from us working together, I'm very much about de-risking. And I know everyone in your spot is about de-risking for the company. That's a big part of your job. So when we do things, we try to build in all kinds of risk mitigation strategies so that we're never relying on just one thread to get to the end. So with that in mind, sort of from a risk management perspective, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think putting in a lot of extra work up front really helps. And I mean these are big engagements, right? For startups. I mean this is some of the largest project spend that some of these companies will ever do, before some type of inflection point or exit event or whatever. And that's really critical to do some of that early diligence. And that's part of it is what I just mentioned, like and the best way to kind of get a feel for a potential partner, like I said, is not necessarily references, but building a network in the medical device space, because it's a really small world, right? That's where most of I get most of my information. It's not necessarily from what I'm fed as far as references, but talking to people in the space. And hey, what have you worked with this group? Have you do you know other people that have? And just like you do for an executive hire that you're trying to bring in. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it though is really the execution piece and figuring out what happens in a number of contingency scenarios. Because just like working with an investor, when everything's going well, it's pretty easy, right? It's pretty straightforward. Everybody's happy. There's not any problems, and it's just easier life. But that happens never. So in the scenarios where things go wrong, in the scenarios where a clinical site drops out, or something goes wrong, or you run out of funding, right? And funding gets hard. I can't imagine that being the case over the last 2 years, right? But it happens. So just talking ahead of time about, hey, how do you guys handle this stuff? I mean, because I think one of the really important pieces is that in CRO land, and frankly in all service provider land and med device, there's most firms are majority serving larger companies. There's some that's not the case for, but that's a very different customer with very different problems.
Mhm.
So figuring out, how much have you worked with startups? And tell me about a difficult situation with the startup. What was without naming names, what was the
Right.
situation and how was it handled? Because you can run into all kinds of unique
Mhm.
problems. And if you've talked about that ahead of time, it's way easier to navigate.
Yeah, you bring up a really, really good point, which is so many of the other companies out there that do what we do are either focused on pharma or the big boys. And, I get that doing clinical trials, doing clinical studies can be very kind of commoditized and scalable if you're just doing execution support. Right. And that's what a lot of them are doing. And there's so much conglomeration in the market in general. And that's happening, in our space as well. There's these big investment firms scooping up service providers. I must get 2 or 3 emails a day of people wanting to buy our company.
Yeah.
And
Me
it's
too. Me too.
yeah. It's what
It's
a
different on
terrible
our side,
problem to
but yes,
have.
no, I believe it. That's you're right. The consolidation in that market is
Yeah.
been pretty crazy to see.
It really is, and it's not something that we're interested in at this time, but it's the bottom line is we're not just bandwidth support. It's not me on an initial call and then you're offloaded to an lower level execution team and they're just executing. Right. I've been involved, as you've seen, through the entire project. So, for us, it's a very different endeavor than I think for some of these high volume, just execution shops. Um, and I'm not sure that that's always clear to people. Was that clear to you from the beginning? I'm just intrigued to know.
I mean, I think that was another one of those hard learnings along the way, right?
Mhm.
That was something that by the time we met, for this project anyway, it was I think I had a pretty good idea of how to navigate that,
Mhm.
but it's definitely not something you just think of naturally, and it's not something that um, most of the time now when we engage a partner, and it really doesn't matter what part of the business it involves. We're doing diligence around, what's been your experience with startups.
Right.
Uh, it just helps answer a lot of questions and solve a lot of problems before they happen, and really align expectations.
I think that's great advice. That's really great advice for other founders because I'm not sure they're thinking like that. In fact, I almost think they might be thinking the opposite of like if you've worked for these bigger companies, you're less of an operational risk or something. I think it's possible that that's going
Yeah,
through some people's minds. But I actually think it's a much bigger risk for a startup to try to go with a company like that.
yeah.
Um,
And I mean, one of the things I really appreciate, and if you prefer to cut this part out after before you put this out, that's totally fine. But
okay.
I appreciate that I can I've got your cell, and if I have a
Yeah.
question, I shoot you a text, right? And you respond quickly, and that's not always the case, right? You got kind of the founder and expert. I don't think I abuse that power, but
You do
it's
not.
uh, reassuring. And when I engage a lawyer, I kind of test for that ahead of time, right? You might do it
Yeah.
through like before you engage, right? Like just shoot him a text or her a text on a Saturday afternoon and see what happens, right? And it's probably people feel differently about this, but I think in startup worlds, that's
Yeah.
important. That's important, right?
No,
And
I'm
it
really
doesn't.
glad you brought that up, actually. I won't cut it out because
Yeah, yeah,
it is important. It absolutely is important. And I think that that's why we're such a great culture fit for startups because we are small, we are, still technically a small business and we're all employee owned and it's personal for us. It's personal for me and it's personal for you. It's still at that stage your business and our business. So it's like a good match where we're personally invested in your success and so on. It's not just, I always tell people, our goal is not to like just sell more studies, which is what makes us different. Our goal is always about the patients, speed to patient, and making sure you're successful because you being successful means the patient gets the technology faster, or more patients get it. And so to that point, just to kind of close out, I wondered because we are so mission oriented around speed to patient, if you could just talk just for a minute about how we will have helped you accelerate speed to patient.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of our battle is market access. We're bringing a technology that is innovative enough that there was not a payment pathway. There was no way to innovate in the particular area. Otoscopes don't get paid today. And if you're bringing new technology to the table in today's healthcare environment, you have to check that financial box. So, this is part of our path there. Fortunately, it's a little pretty far down the path. I think and this is something that's going to drive our Cat 1 conversion and further coverage decisions and adoption and all of this stuff. And it's kind of a mission critical piece for our business. So the thought that you guys have put into it and that you personally have kind of given to the project is going to be a key value inflection point when we get on the other side of this.
Thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate it. This was great. Thank you so much.